The roots of Weather World go back to the late 1950s. And in fact, this month is the 60-year anniversary of weather broadcasts from Penn State. Tonight we continue our conversation with Dr. Charles Hosler, the man who started it all. What do you remember from that first broadcast from the Sparks building, Charlie?
Well, it was a very amateur operation from everyone's point of view, my own and the people who were running the equipment. We had to microwave the signal to Altoona, to WFBG on Wapsianotic Mountain, and sometimes the wind would blow the antenna down. Sometimes they had two cameras. Often one camera would fail, and the audio would fail. It was a pretty amateur operation, but it was very essential to the people of central Pennsylvania because they didn't really have access to a real weather forecast.
And what kind of feedback did you get from the public?
Tremendous feedback. And at one point, this was something I did on the side. I never was paid to do this sort of thing. But I got up at 6 o'clock in the morning and prepared the weather maps and so forth to be able to do this. And it got to the point where my teaching duties and so forth were so great that I mentioned one time we may have to discontinue this. And spontaneously, a group of farmers in Center and Huntington counties had a meeting and raised, I had mentioned that we didn't have a facsimile machine. I had to plot the weather maps. And they sent me a check for $1,725 to buy a facsimile machine so we could continue the broadcast, because it really was essential to many farm operations, whether it was making hay or planting seeds or whatever. And it was a very important public service that we were performing.
Do you remember any specific forecast at that time that really kind of solidified the Charlie Hosler persona out there?
Well, no, I can't remember any in particular, except I remember Hurricane Agnes. I don't remember what year that was.
Yeah.
But again, that was the only source of really good information from central Pennsylvania, was that our broadcast. And making hay was an important thing. They used to have an expression, make hay with Hosler, you know.
Okay.
Because I could tell them, and as John knows, some days you know exactly what the weather's going to be, and you can be 100% sure. Other days you're so-so. And I tried to convey that as part of the forecast, which was much appreciated. And so people could really bank on it. If I said it absolutely wasn't going to rain, they knew it wouldn't.
Who were some of the other folks in those early years in the department that helped you out?
I had graduate students. Dick Hallgren, who later he was from Kersey, Pennsylvania, up here. He got his PhD under me and became head of the National Weather Service. Joel Myers, who's the founder of AccuWeather, was one of the graduate students who did the program. Bob Duquette, who was an assistant professor here, did the program. And Ray Booker, who was a graduate student. So there were a number of graduate students who got their start and got some self-confidence through doing the program.
You were involved back in the 1950s in some of the first attempts to kind of certify those folks who did television weather. This was an effort through the American Meteorological Society.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, there was a committee of the American Meteorological Society. As a matter of fact, I was the chairman. And I made up an exam, which we sent out by sort of like a correspondence course, and people had to pass this test, and I corrected the tests. And I think I had certification number 6 or something.
I believe you did.
I think Francis Davis in Philadelphia was number 1, and I don't know whether any of the others are still surviving or not, but now there are, I guess, thousands of them.
Yeah, that program has survived to this day under various names.
Right.
Talk about the transition of this weather show once Penn State Public Broadcasting was founded in the mid-1960s.
Well, then it became a much more professional operation, of course. We had color, and so you could do much more in the way of illustration. And they had a professional staff doing it, so there weren't so many interruptions in the programming.
You went on to hold many positions here at Penn State: Dean of the College of Earth and Mineral Sciences, Senior Vice President for Research and Dean of the Graduate School, just to name a few. What are you most proud of when it comes to your time at Penn State?
Oh, I think that the greatest pride is like a parent with children is in the students we had. When you look at the generals who ran in the Air Weather Service, 3 heads of the National Weather Service, who graduated from here, people who started businesses that were very successful, people had successful careers as professors, as teachers. That's the satisfaction. Whether these people ever remember who I was or not, I can take some vicarious pride in having played a small role in their development and making the facilities possible and the education possible for them to produce to reach their real potential.
Well, I can assure you, Charlie, many of them do remember, including yours truly, and we thank you for all you've done for Penn State, and thanks for taking us back on memory lane to the early years of what is now
It was my pleasure.
And we will be back in a moment with a recap of the short-range forecast.